Over this channel's history, there has been one modern archetype that has performed a cut above the rest. And no, it's not what you'd expect. Squirrel Combo has boasted an astonishing 87% win rate, and today we're going to see if we can keep a good thing going with Heliod Squirrel Combo. This is a classic modern deck built around Heliod Sun Crowned that features a new twist to go infinite in a variety of different ways. Of course, you can gain infinite life the old-fashioned way with Heliod and Spike Feeder, or deal infinite damage with Heliod and Walking Ballista, but Heliod also gains infinite life along with Auriok Champion and Scurry Oak, or you can just drop an Oak and Rosy Cotton to generate infinite squirrels on their own. This deck can kill as early as turn 2 and is very impressive in a format rampant with scam. These squirrels don't play no games. Let me show you how they roll. Let's see if the squirrels can reign supreme. We're on the play, we'll take it. Opening 7, this looks good. Our opponent has revealed a Giganta. We'll start with our Yavimaya into an Arbor Elf, and we'll pass turn. Opponent with the Verdant Catacombs, they fetch. Blood Crypt, Shock, Ragavan. We are okay with that. Drew into a Horizon Canopy. We're gonna play out our Prismatic Vista. We'll fetch Basic Plains. We're gonna untap our Cradle, and we'll cast out a Heliod. So we have infinite life next turn. Back to my opponent, untap their Blood Crypt. Kraken with Ragavan. The monkey is pilfering, they reveal a Verdant Catacombs, get themselves a treasure token. Wooded Foothills, nothing else. We draw into a Besaju. A little strange they didn't do anything else there. I think we'll just pass the turn here. Opponent fetches, Blood Crypt tapped, and they untap. Bloodstained Mire into a Tarmogoyf, so this is looking like Jund. Kraken with the Ragavan. Sure, we'll move to block. 4 damage, we're gonna add 4 mana, and we're gonna cast a Collected Company. Not the best Coco. We'll get an Arbor Elf and a Rosy Cotton. Rosy Cotton's gonna trigger. We'll get a food. Food comes into play, we're gonna put a counter on our other elf. Ragavan and Elf trade. Second main, nothing else, back our way. Drew another Verdant Catacombs. We'll play that to start with. Green, green, white, cast out a Spike Feeder. And we'll just pass turn back. Opponent untaps. Wooded Foothills, attack for 3, no blocks. Down to 14, another Ragavan, another Tarmogoyf. Back our way, we drew another Spike Feeder, which is kind of funny. We'll play out our Besaju. Play out the second Spike Feeder. Let's remove a counter, gain 2 life. We'll put a counter on the Spike Feeder. Let's do it again. The main problem with this deck, which you'll see several times throughout today's video, is there is no way to actually loop your infinite combo on Magic Online without actually clicking through the steps. As a result, opponents don't tend to scoop, despite the fact that the game should be over. Put ourselves up to 100 life. Feels like a good number to stop at. Back to my opponent. As if infinite life wasn't enough, my opponent finally decided to admit defeat when we assembled our second infinite combo of the game, giving our Walking Ballista lifelink and pinging our opponent for infinite damage. We drew into a Ballista. That is going to be lethal. Cast a Ballista, trigger, gain a life. My opponent scoops, we're up a game. Opening 7 looks good, we'll keep it. Wooded Foothills, fetch, Blood Crypt, Shock, Inquisition of Kozilek. See what they take. Take an Innkeeper. Back our way, drew into a Spike Feeder. We'll play out the Temple Garden. We'll shock, and we'll Utopia Sprawl it. And we'll say white. Back our opponent's way, Stomping Ground, into a Ragavan, dashed. Treasure, reveals a Prosperous Innkeeper off the top. Can't cast it. Back to us. Drew into a Yavimaya. I think we're gonna hold that for now. Let's play out our Pendlehaven into a Spike Feeder. Opponent Unholy Heat on my Spike Feeder. We're gonna gain 4 life, go back up to 20, back their way. Here comes the monkey, bashes into the red zone. Horizon Canopy off the top, treasure token into play. Monkey back to hand. Quite a little bit of a disappointing turn. We're gonna play out our Yavimaya, and then we'll just pass turn back. Ren 6 enters the fray, plus Ren 6, get the Foothills into hand, put it into play. Pithing Needle is fine. Maybe they'll name Ren 6. Walking Ballista instead. Red mana, Ragavan. I'm gonna respond to this Ragavan. I'm gonna cast a Collected Company. Then we're gonna get a Scurry Oak and a Rosy Cotton. Any order with the rest of them, we'll yield to our Rosy Cotton. It's gonna trigger. It's gonna target the Scurry Oak with 1/1 counter. Gonna make some squirrels. My opponent scoops for some reason. We're 1-0. Our second match of this wonderful modern league. Opening 7 looks good. We'll keep it. Verdant Catacombs from our opponent. Overgrown Tomb. Delated Halfling. Could be Yawgmoth. We're going to fetch with our Windswept Teeth. We're going to get a Temple Garden here. And we're going to Utopia Sprawl our garden. We're going to say white. Back the other way. 2 mana from my opponent, Wall of Roots. Minus the wall into a Gilded Goose. Twilight Mire as their second land drop. Back to us. 2 cards in my opponent's hand. We're going to play out our Pendelhaven into an Auriok Champion. Auriok Champion actually poses a huge problem for Black-Green Yawgmoth to contest with, as there is no way to remove it once it's in play. It negates Yawgmoth's looping combo with Undying creatures and Blood Artist by gaining life every time a new creature enters the battlefield. My opponent is going to have to win the old-fashioned way, with combat. 2 mana for a Hapatra from my opponent. Gain another life, another counter on the champion. No attacks, 1 card in my opponent's hand. Drew into a Windswept Teeth. We're going to play that out. We'll fetch. Let's get a basic forest. We're going to cast Kyla's Reconstruction. X equals 2. We're going to get a Spike Feeder here and a Rosy Cotton. Those will come into play. We'll gain 4 life. Rosy Cotton makes a food. It's going to trigger. Put a counter on the Spike Feeder. Champion triggers. Put a counter on the Spike Feeder. Champion triggers. Put a counter on the Rosy Cotton. Back the other way. Opponent's going to sacrifice a creature with their Grist, targeting my Spike Feeder. How we're going to move a counter. We'll gain 2 life. My opponent scoops. This is game 2, opening 7. I think this might be a little slow. We'll mulligan. I like this much better. We'll keep this. And I think we get rid of an Auriok Champion. Opponent with a Nurturing Peatland into a Delighted Halfling. We'll leave with our Verdant Catacombs. We'll fetch. Temple Garden. Shock. Utopia Sprawl. Oh, we will name white. Twilight Mire from our opponent into a Hapatra. Drawn to a Ranger Captain. We're going to start with an Auriok Champion. Play out a land. Pass the turn. My opponent cycles a Troll of Khazad-dûm. Haven't seen that one before. Blooming Marsh, no attacks, fetch end of turn, Temple Garden tapped. Drew into a Heliod, pretty good. Play that out. No attacks, pass the turn back. Feels like a Haywire Might. Cord for 1, Haywire Might will trigger. Put a counter on the Auriok Champion. Heliod gets exiled. Counter does not resolve. Opponent with their 4th land to a Grist the Hunger Tide. Grist pluses will gain a life, nothing else. This game grinds on for a long time, but my opponent is able to establish their namesake, Yawgmoth, next turn, and along with Grist and Zulaport Cutthroat, slowly churn an advantage to the point where I can't establish a board state. The presence of Auriok Champion keeps me afloat, but eventually, the dam breaks and I'm sunk by the overwhelming value the good doctor generates. Opponent ultimates Grist, down to 16 life. Another Grist, proliferate up the Grist, proliferate it up again, and this will be lethal. Take the play of this game. Interesting hand, we'll keep it. Windswept Teeth, fetch, basic forest, Utopia Sprawl. We'll name white. Verdant from my opponent. Drew into a Temple Garden. We'll shock that in. Another Utopia Sprawl. We'll name white again. I'll play out a Heliod. Overgrown Tomb tapped from my opponent. Wall of Roots. Young Wolf. Another Heliod. Very interesting. I'll play out a Ranger Captain. Trigger. Get ourselves a Ballista. Pass turn back. Opponent cycles a Generous end of turn. Overgrown Tomb. Necromentia. Not particularly surprised here. Name Walking Ballista. Got ourselves a zombie. We're going to draw a card end of turn. Drew into a Spike Feeder. I think we'll play that out. Our opponent scoops. 2-0. Match 3, let's keep it going. We're on the play. 7 looks good, we'll keep it. Windswept Teeth, pass the turn. Polluted Delta from our opponent, they fetch. Steamvent Shock, Preordain. Card is good, I hear. They scry 1 top, 1 bottom. We'll fetch end of turn, get a Temple Garden tapped, untap. Drew into an Auriok Champion. We're going to fetch here. Basic Plains. Play out our Innkeeper to ramp our mana. Treasure, back your way. Basic Swamp into a Dragon's Rage Channeler. Thoughtseize targeting me. Lots of choices. They take the Ranger Captain of Eos. Interesting choice. Drew our second Collected Company. We're going to stick this Heliod while we've got the chance. And we'll pass the turn back. Scalding Tarn into a Consider. Ragavan to the graveyard. Ledger Shredder to the graveyard. Don't see that one much these days. Crack for 3. Fetch, Shock, Dragon's Rage number 2. Drew into an Arbor Elf. Little unfortunate. Play out our Auriok Champion. Trigger Innkeeper. I'll put a counter on our Innkeeper here. Pass turn back. Basic Island. Attack for 6. Down to 10. Opponent has 4 cards in hand. Alright, drew a Forest. I'm going to play that out. Have to imagine our opponent's holding up counter magic. Play out an Arbor Elf. 2 triggers. First trigger. Counter on the Innkeeper. Second trigger. Put a counter on the Elf. Move to combat. We'll crack for 3. Opponent with a Drown in the Lock, killing our Innkeeper. 2 mana, Drown in the Lock, targeting our Arbor Elf. Back to them. Attack for 6. We're down to 6. Preordain. Croaks it to the graveyard. Ragavan to the graveyard. 1 top, 1 bottom. Untap. Drew into a Spike Feeder. I think we're going to start with that one. Play that out. Another Drown in the Lock, up to 3 of those. That's going to be game. Down 1. Opening 7 looks great, we'll keep it. Opponent's on a mold of 6. Verdant Catacombs will pass turn. Mishra's Bauble. They look at their top card. Polluted Delta. Fetch. Shock into Steam Vents. We'll fetch a Temple Garden. untap. Draw a card off a bauble, drew into another Temple Garden. I will play that out. If they have Stern Scolding, they get us here. Play out the Auriok Champion. They do not. Opponent plays out Scalding Tarn, pass the turn back to us. Drew into a Scurry Oak. We'll play out a land. I think we're just going to pass it back. From this position, my game plan is to bide my time with Auriok Champion until I have access to 7 mana, at which point I will use my Veil of Summer to force both my Scurry Oak and Rosy Cotton into play to go infinite. Drew a Utopia Sprawl, we'll take it. Play out a land. Oh no, I cast the wrong card. That was supposed to be Utopia Sprawl. That was unfortunate. That kind of ruins my plans here. Alright, well, change of plans. We'll draw a card. Fetch, get a forest, and we'll sprawl the land again. Yeah, didn't mean to do that one there. Opponent with a Thoughtseize. Yep, Thoughtseize resolves. My blunder wound up being a big one, a fatal mistake that I wasn't able to come back from. I get rolled by the Dragon's Rage Channeler and Ledger Shredder, while my creatures bite the dust turn after turn. We're 2-1. We're going to jump into Game 2 of Match 4 to showcase what I perceive to be the biggest problem with this deck. No, it's not that it's not competitive, it's that opponents don't respect assembling Infinite on Magic Online, and as a result, games that should be out of reach for the opponent wind up being winnable if they're clutching their MTGO ticks tight and don't want to be noble and bow out in league play. We wind up losing Match 4 to Amulet Titan even though we assembled our Infinite combo in Game 2. It was a very discouraging and disappointing result to a match that very well could have been won. And as for our last match of this league, I was easily able to assemble Infinite in all 3 games of the match, but in games 2 and 3, I auto-yielded through my triggers and wound up targeting the wrong creatures with Heliod's +1/+1 counters. Fortunately, justice was served as my opponent timed out due to dirtling. While this deck is great, it's probably not the best choice for Magic Online unless your opponents are willing to concede. And on that note, this was a stressful league, I'm spent, so I'm going to bow out. I'll see you all again soon. You know the deal. Be well, everybody.